You see trucks on nearly all road maintenance jobs, hauling tons of aggregate or asphaltic mixtures, towing rollers, tar pots, crack sealers, air compressors, carrying weed spraying equipment, traffic control devices, sanders, and plowing snow, all to keep our highways in good condition. The department has all kinds of trucks, from the single-axle maintainers and dump trucks to the tandem axle dump trucks, oil distributors, and transports. Because trucks are so important to our highway maintenance force, you need to know what you, the operator, can do to keep your truck in top working condition. And you need to know how to operate your truck properly and safely. This video program is the first of 5 dealing with dump truck operation and maintenance. It deals with the daily check you should make on your truck, as well as with the startup and shutdown procedures you should follow. The other programs cover basic operation, shifting, driving, dumping, and tailgate spreading, as well as working with pups, pavers, and other equipment. The final program in the series covers the PMA. Because our trucks are made by different manufacturers, you should become familiar with the operator's manual for your unit. Also, get to know the requirements of the department's Equipment Preventive Maintenance Manual. In addition, the Training Requirements Manual for both gasoline and diesel engines contains a lot of helpful information on vehicle maintenance and operation. So, to begin, the daily check. To make sure your truck is in good condition before you operate it each day, perform the inspections included in the daily check before you leave the yard. The daily check consists of under the hood or engine inspections, in-cab checks when you start the engine, and the walk-around inspection. It should also include a dump bed check if you're going to use the dump bed during the day. So start under the hood, in the engine compartment. Check the engine oil every day. Keep the level between the full and add marks on the dipstick. And note the condition of the oil, especially if the level is higher today than it was yesterday. If it is discolored, gritty, or smells of fuel, don't start the engine until you've figured out the problem and corrected it. Then visually check the fuel filter and fuel lines for leaks. Now observe the coolant level in the coolant reservoir or in the radiator if your truck doesn't have a reservoir. Keep it at the level recommended by the manufacturer. Some radiators have a sight glass on the side. If you can see coolant in the glass, you've got enough. On trucks with older cooling systems, check the radiator cap. If the gasket is worn, get a new one. But for trucks with the new systems, don't open the cap too often. The system will lose pressure. Inspect the radiator and hoses for leaks. Next, check the fan belts. If they're too loose, tighten them. If they're worn or cracked, replace them. Whatever needs doing, do it now. No sense risking a breakdown out on the road. Check the level of the power steering fluid. And inspect the hoses and connections while you're at it. Finally, if your truck's battery is in the engine compartment, take a look at it now. Check the water level in each cell. Be sure the terminals are clean and check the tightness and condition of the clamps and cables. If the battery is on the side of the truck or behind the cab, check it later when you do the walk-around inspection. But before that, you need to get in the cab. Start the engine. And do the in-cab checks. So I'll interrupt the daily check for a moment to explain the basic startup procedure. First, make sure the parking brake is set and the transmission is in neutral. Then, depress the clutch pedal. Turn the key and press the starter button. The engine should start right up. If the engine doesn't start right away, keep pressing the starter button until it does, but not for more than 30 seconds continuously. If the engine doesn't start within 30 seconds, release the button and wait 1 to 2 minutes before trying again. Continued cranking will just wear down the battery and may damage the starter. Once the engine starts, let it idle to warm up. Never rev a cold engine. The warm-up period is important for several reasons. First, it allows time for oil pressure to build up, producing an oil film on internal engine parts and lubricating turbocharger bearings. You should get an oil pressure reading right away. So check the gauge. If it shows 0 or low pressure, shut down the engine. You've got a major problem. The warm-up also allows the pistons to expand to fit the cylinders. It allows the coolant temperature to increase. And it provides time for air pressure to build up in the braking system. A warning light and buzzer will stay on until the pressure reaches 60 pounds. Finally, the warm-up period gives you time to do the walk-around inspection. So check the tires every day. Use a gauge if you think they've got low pressure. Underinflated tires wear out quickly and make the truck harder to control. Also, check for loose or broken lug nuts and for deep cuts or unusual wear on the tread or sidewalks. Look under the truck. Any sign of leaks? Fuel, oil, or water? If so, find the source of the leakage and get it taken care of. Walk all the way around the truck, checking the tires, looking for leaks, noting anything broken or missing. Take care of any problems now. If you'll be using the dump bed during the day, now's a good time to check it too. If you're going to get under it, block it with the safety props or a sturdy block of wood so it can't come down on you. Check for damage and hydraulic leaks around the hydraulic ram and lines. Be sure, too, that the bed is empty and clean. Then get back in the cab and finish your in-cab checks. Look at the gauges. The truck's been warming up for a few minutes, so all the readings should be up. You can start out as soon as you get a reading from the temperature gauge. But move slowly and avoid hard pulls until the engine reaches normal operating temperature, about 180 or 190 degrees. The oil pressure should be about 60 pounds per square inch. The air pressure gauges should be above 60 psi before you move the truck. Don't drive it until the warning light and buzzer go off. To be safe, however, wait until the air pressure's between 90 and 120 before you take the truck out on the road. Check the amp meter to make sure the battery is charging, and the voltmeter to note the condition of the battery. Also, check the air filter restriction indicator. It'll let you know when you should clean or replace the air filter. Finally, check your fuel gauge. The last thing you want to happen is to run out of fuel on your way to the work area. Now, just a few things left before heading out, but important ones. Keep your windshield clean, as well as the windows and mirrors. Adjust the mirrors if necessary. Now, check your lights. Headlights, running lights, turn signals, strobe. Check them in back, too. But you'll need help to check the backup lights and brake lights. If a light isn't working, it may be a loose wire or a burned out bulb. But whatever it is, you need your lights. So find the problem and fix it now. Check the free play in the clutch pedal. You should be able to depress it at least 1.5 inches before the clutch starts to disengage. Finally, fasten your seatbelt. Nothing adds more to your safety than the few seconds it takes to buckle up. Then off you go, confident that your truck is in good shape and ready for a day's work. Once you make these checks and procedures part of your daily routine, they'll go quickly. Of course, checking your equipment never really stops. Even when you're out on the road, you need to watch, listen, and feel for problems. I'll say more about this in later parts of the course as I talk about operation. Before I finish this program, however, I want to cover shutdown. Obviously, there's more to shutting down than just parking and shutting off the engine. If you're not parking in the shed, be sure to park on fairly level ground. Put the transmission in neutral and set the parking brake. Pretty obvious steps, right? But I'll give you a reason that's not so obvious. If a diesel truck is parked in gear and it begins to roll, the engine could start by heat of compression. So, transmission in neutral, parking brake set, and a level parking spot if possible. If you have to park on a grade, block the wheels or turn them toward the curb. Now, engines should idle from 3 to 5 minutes to cool down gradually. The idling allows the lubricating oil and water to carry heat away from the iron masses of the engine block. While the engine cools, clean up the cab. It's easy enough for the cab to get cluttered during the day, but don't let that be an excuse for leaving it that way. Whether you or someone else will be operating it tomorrow, straighten up the operator's area today. Then get out and do a quick walk-around inspection. Just a general look for obvious damage. Finding any now will allow you to get it corrected that much sooner. It's a good idea to fill the fuel tank at the end of the day. You save the time it would take you to refuel in the morning, and you prevent water from condensing in the tank overnight. Just be sure to go through the cool down period first, because you have to shut off the engine while you fuel up. So once the engine has cooled enough and the truck's parked where you want it, shut down the engine. It's a good idea to check the power steering fluid while the engine's still warm, but never overfill it or any other fluid. That's usually as bad as not having enough. And finally, every other day or so, bleed the air tanks. Draining them will get rid of any moisture built up in the system. So that covers the daily check and startup and shutdown procedures on single and tandem axle dump trucks. Checking and servicing your truck each day, starting it up properly, and following the correct shutdown procedure will help make the equipment safe to operate and keep it running smoothly.
This is part 2 in our series of programs on dump trucks. In part 1, I covered the daily check, startup, and shutdown, the procedures that apply to both single and tandem axle dump trucks. Now I want to concentrate on the single axle dump trucks, often called bobtails. I'll cover shifting, general driving, braking, turning, backing, loading, dumping, and spreading. So to begin, shifting. Our single-axle dump trucks have 5-speed manual transmissions with 2-speed rear axles. Always read the operator's manual for your truck to get familiar with shifting and clutching procedures. The shift pattern is shown in the manual. It's also etched on the gear shift knob or shown on a decal on the sun visor. Study the pattern until you've got it firmly in mind. If you're new to truck driving, you'll need to practice going through the shift pattern and using the clutch and accelerator before you can do it smoothly. Even if you have some experience in driving trucks, there may be room for improvement. Improper shifting is hard on the truck's transmission, no matter who's behind the wheel. Here's a demonstration of proper shifting with the engine off. Start out in either first or second gear, a gear low enough to avoid slipping the clutch. Double clutch when you shift gears. In other words, use 2 clutch movements for each gear change. To shift the 2-speed axle into high range, lift up the switch on the gear shift. In effect, you split 4th gear by shifting from low to high range. By using the 2-speed axle as a splitter, 10 different gear speeds or combinations are available to you. With experience, you'll learn how to use them according to different situations and conditions. For now, the important points about 2-speed axles are these. Always start and park the truck with the rear axle in low range. Never shift axle speeds while moving in reverse. Stop the truck first, then shift. Always keep some pressure on the accelerator whenever you move the 2-speed control switch, whether up or down, until you're ready for the 2-speed to shift. And as you move the control switch, depress and release the clutch pedal to allow the axle to shift. Here's what I mean for these last 2 points. Watch closely. While keeping pressure on the accelerator, the operator moves the control switch to high. Then he releases the accelerator, depresses the clutch pedal, releases the clutch pedal as the axle shifts, and accelerates smoothly at the same time. Now that was upshifting the two-speed axle. To review, press on the accelerator, move the control switch to high, release the accelerator, depress the clutch pedal, and release it as the axle shifts, and accelerate smoothly. The same steps apply to downshifting as well. Now, when you drive, there are two speeds to keep an eye on: the road speed and the engine speed. For proper shifting, you have to synchronize the engine speed to the road speed as closely as possible. So watch both the speedometer and the tachometer and listen to the engine. Don't run it too fast or too slow for the gear you're using. Until you have the shift points for your truck memorized, mark them prominently inside the cab. Both overspeeding the engine and lugging it are damaging. Avoid them. And as a rule, don't run the engine up to governed speed in the lower gears. You'll just waste fuel and make extra noise. Keep the RPMs down to the actual power required by the engine to get the truck rolling. Then, as you upshift, increase the road speed in each gear with a progressive increase in engine speed. Finally, 2 more points. First, never coast in neutral while you're driving. That lessens your overall control of the truck. Second, don't ride the clutch. Resting your foot on the clutch pedal while you're driving will wear out the clutch and possibly damage the engine or transmission. As I said earlier, it'll take practice to shift smoothly, and it will take further study and experience to know what to do in various situations and conditions. Your instructor and the department's training manuals will give specific examples, explain more of the fine points, and answer your questions. Now I want to cover some points about general driving. You know, the public probably judges us more on how we drive our trucks than on how we operate all other types of equipment put together. We've got so many units out there on the road that if we don't drive courteously and safely, our mistakes will catch up with us fast. I'm not talking about anything you haven't heard before. No matter what you drive, from a subcompact to an 18-wheeler, you should know and follow the rules of the road. But we all tend to overlook them at times, to relax or get in too much of a hurry to obey them in certain situations. So basically, develop good driving habits and follow them consistently. Use your mirrors. Know what's behind you as well as what's up ahead. Steer with both hands on the wheel, except when you're shifting or using the radio, of course. You'll get in some spots where sloppy steering would be disastrous. Stay within the lane lines and signal when you change lanes. Observe speed limits, and remember they're just that, limits. Go slower than the posted speed when road conditions, traffic, or your load require it. For example, when you tow another piece of equipment, keep your speed down, regardless of the legal limit. In addition to checking your speedometer occasionally, look at the other gauges as well: fuel, pressure, temperature, air restriction indicator, and the others. Watch for warnings of trouble before the trouble gets serious. Obey signs, signals, and lane markings. Driving a state dump truck on official business doesn't exempt you from doing so. Take your turn at intersections. Remember that public image you're trying not to tarnish. Avoid tailgating. Keeping a good safety cushion between you and the vehicle ahead will prevent rear-end collisions. And finally, use all your skills and good judgment when you drive in bad weather. Rain, ice, snow, and wind make all the preceding concerns even more important. All right, braking. Our trucks carry a lot of weight, and once they get rolling, it takes a lot of force to slow them down. So first of all, as I said a minute ago, drive at a safe speed. Anticipate situations in which you'll have to slow down or stop. Begin applying the brakes sooner than you would in a smaller, lighter vehicle. As you slow down, watch the tachometer and downshift to let the truck's engine assist the brakes. For downhill driving, apply the brakes to reduce speed. And then shift to a lower gear before you start down the grade. Changing gears after you're on the hill is risky. And keep the truck in gear. That enables you to maintain steering control. On steep hills, never use your brakes alone. If the road is slippery and the truck begins to slide with the brakes set, you'll lose control because you can't steer with the wheels locked. So, to review braking, drive at a safe speed to begin with. Anticipate the need to slow down or stop. Begin applying the brakes sooner than with a lighter vehicle. Downshift properly to let the truck's engine help the foot brakes. And for downgrades, slow down, shift to a lower gear, and stay in gear as you go downhill. Now, turning the dump truck. Because of the size of the bobtail and the weight it will often be carrying, you'll need to be careful when you make turns. Always signal well in advance and slow down to a safe turning speed or come to a full stop as the situation requires. Stay within the proper lane while you turn. Avoid drifting into a neighboring lane, and definitely don't cross over the center line. For right turns, be especially careful not to run over curbs or into signs. That's sloppy driving, and it's usually unnecessary. On curves, especially on tight ones, slow down before you enter the curve. Downshift and go into the curve under power to have better control of the truck. Here it's not like driving a car. With a truck, you need to keep your RPMs and road speed up and keep your truck in motion. Too much slowing and braking are inefficient. They waste time and fuel. So, to review turning, signal well in advance. Slow down, stay in your lane throughout the turn, and be especially careful not to cut right turns too sharp. On curves, not only slow down in advance, but downshift as well. Go in under power and keep both your engine and road speeds up. Next, backing the bobtail. Backing up is the most accident-prone driving maneuver. The design of the truck restricts your vision to what you can see in your mirrors. But it's what you can't see that causes the problems. There are hidden areas behind the truck, blind spots down low, directly behind and to the right rear. These blind spots are large enough to hide fixed objects, equipment, or personnel from your view. So, if you're stopped in one place for more than a few minutes, or if you have any doubts about what's behind your truck, get out of the cab and look to make sure the way is clear. Pick out some reference points that you can back toward and keep them in view in your mirrors as you back up. Better yet, use someone to spot for you. Follow his directions to back up safely. But in any case, always use your mirrors. Don't lean out of the cab or you'll lose control of the truck. Back at a safe, slow speed so you'll be able to stop quickly if you have to. And be prepared to set the parking brake. Get out of the cab and take another look behind you, just to make sure the way remains clear. So, to quickly review backing, first check behind the truck. Use reference points or a spotter to guide you. Use your mirrors. Don't lean out of the cab. And back up at a safe, slow speed. Now, a few points about loading your bobtail. Park close to the material and the loader to minimize the loader's travel distance. Park at about a 45-degree angle to the face of the stockpile. This way, the loader can follow a V-shaped path to travel less distance and do less turning to load your truck. And that means less fuel burned and faster loading times. On many jobs, this really makes a difference in production rates. Now, sometimes you'll load your own truck, but whoever loads your truck, don't allow it to be overloaded. You, the operator, are responsible for observing weight limits. Finally, each time your bobtail is loaded, clean off the bed before you head out on the road. Now, for dumping. Always position your truck so that it's as level as possible when you dump. And be sure you've got enough overhead clearance before you raise the bed. On the bobtail, the dump bed is operated by using the power takeoff, or PTO, the hoist lever, and the tailgate trip lever. To dump a load, first put the transmission in neutral and apply the brake. Then depress the clutch and engage the PTO. Move the hoist control speed up the engine and pull the tailgate trip lever. Speed the engine just enough to raise the bed smoothly. After you've dumped the load, drive ahead a few feet to clear the pile and start bringing the bed down. One caution here. With the bed up, sudden, jerky movements may damage the hydraulic ram. So pull away slowly and smoothly. To lower the bed, move the hoist lever, depress the clutch, put the transmission in neutral, and disengage the PTO. Then set the parking brake, get out, and relatch the tailgate. If there's any loose material on the truck, brush it off. Okay, spreading is similar to dumping, with a few added steps. First, you regulate the flow of material from the bed by adjusting the tailgate spreader change to control the size of the tailgate opening. Then you position your truck ahead of the spread area. Start raising the bed, drive forward, and trip the tailgate latch. Continue raising the bed smoothly. You want the material to spread evenly behind the truck. Then bring down the bed. Latch the tailgate and head back for another load. Now here's the procedure again in more detail. Be sure the tailgate spreader chains are adjusted for the flow of material you want. With the truck in position, engage the PTO. Put the transmission in gear, move the hoist control to start raising the bed. Drive forward and pause the hoist control in neutral while you trip the tailgate. Then raise the bed a little at a time to keep the material from spilling over the top of the tailgate. Watch the results in your mirror. And when the load is completely spread, let the bed down. Stop the truck. Put the transmission in neutral and disengage the PTO. Then relatch the tailgate. So whether you dump a load in one spot or spread it, you use the truck's transmission, power takeoff, hoist control, and tailgate trip lever. And that's it for operating single-axle dump trucks and for part 2 of our series. In part 3, I'll cover many of the same points as they apply to tandem axle dump trucks.
This is part 3 in our series of programs on dump trucks. In part 1, I covered the daily check, startup, and shutdown, the procedures that apply to both single-axle and tandem-axle dump trucks. Part 2 dealt with driving and working with single-axle dump trucks specifically. Daily check. Taking a few minutes each morning to look over your truck and service a few important items will help keep it running smoothly and safely. No one wants to break down out on the road or in the middle of the job. So keep in mind the procedures I discussed in part 1. Take them seriously and put them into practice. They really do make a difference. I'll begin here with shifting. Knowing how to use the transmission correctly is about the most important skill a truck operator can have, and it's probably the hardest to learn. Our tandem axle dump trucks mainly have 2 types of transmissions. Some have a 13-speed transmission, others a 16-speed transmission. I'll use a 13-speed transmission in this program. Learning to shift either one takes time and practice. Be sure to read the operator's manual for instructions on shifting gears in the truck you'll be operating. In addition, the Training Requirements Manual has a lot of helpful information. definitions, explanations, and detailed procedures. Get familiar with its contents. Before I deal specifically with a 13-speed transmission, let me bring up some basic points. First, the shift pattern for your truck will be etched on the gear shift knob and shown on a card attached to the sun visor. Learn the position for each gear. Now, running the engine over the governed speed. The maximum RPM the engine can reach in any one gear can damage it. So use the tachometer to keep track of the RPM. It'll help you know when to shift. Don't run the engine too fast or too slow for the gear you're using. If your tachometer is broken, the sound of the engine will be your clue to shifting at the right time. But get the tachometer repaired as soon as possible. Okay, so now the 13-speed transmission. Here, again, you see the shifting pattern. There are really only 5 forward positions, but there are 2 ranges, low and high, as well as direct and overdrive settings that are used to split each gear in the high range. To change from low range to high range, you pull up the range control button below the gear shift knob. Push it down to return to low range. To split gears while in high range, you move the splitter selector forward to overdrive and back to direct. Now, there's a lot more to operating the 13-speed transmission than just that. Besides the gear shift controls, you of course have to use the clutch and accelerator. But let's look at the upshifting procedure to give you an idea of how it's done. You of course start the engine with the transmission in neutral. The range control button should be down, in low range. Then head out in the lowest gear that lets you get rolling without slipping the clutch. Low gear if you've got a full dump bed or if the road is rough. But here he's starting in first, then shifting to second. Notice how quickly this operator upshifts from one gear to the next. Now third. This is progressive shifting, shifting into a higher gear before the engine reaches governed speed. Finally, fourth gear. To shift to high range, you pull up the range control button and shift to fifth, the same shift pattern position as first gear. Continue upshifting in high range, but this time you split each gear by flipping the splitter selector forward to overdrive after you've built up a little more speed in each gear. Each time you upshift, you flip the splitter selector back to direct, just after you move the gear shift lever and before you let up on the clutch pedal. Then flip the selector to overdrive to split the gear, and so on, right up to 8th gear. And that's the 13-speed transmission. But with all transmissions, watch the tachometer and listen to the engine. Don't let the engine run too fast or too slow for the gear you're using. As your speed decreases and the RPMs fall, downshift to the next lower gear. Downshifting saves a lot of wear on the brakes because it lets the engine help slow the truck. When you're driving on a busy road, stay in the highest gear that lets you keep up with traffic and still have some power in reserve. As I said, it's going to take some practice to learn to shift correctly. The load you're carrying, the driving conditions, the sound of the engine, and the tachometer will influence which gear you choose. But with experience, you'll begin to select the correct gear almost instinctively. The only hard and fast rules are these. Always start and park the truck in the low range. Never shift ranges while moving in reverse. Stop the truck first, then shift. And finally, don't ride the clutch. Resting your foot on the clutch pedal will wear it out and could possibly damage the engine. Okay, here's something that may be new to you. The differential lock, or power divider. It's not really part of the transmission, but it may help you get out of some tough situations. On tandem dump trucks, the power to move the truck normally comes from just one of the two rear axles. But if you get into a situation where you need both axles pulling for more traction, stop the truck, engage the differential lock, and disengage it when you get out of trouble. But remember, never engage the differential lock when your wheels are spinning. So use it when you're fully stopped and disengage it before you get back on a good surface. Okay, now for braking. The points covered for braking in Part 2 of this series also apply for tandem axle dump trucks. But keep in mind that tandem axle trucks are bigger and carry heavier loads than single axle trucks. So before you leave the yard, be sure the air pressure in the air brake system is up to at least 90 pounds. Make sure the brake lights are working. Test your brakes. Then on the road, stay alert. Anticipate the need to slow down or stop. Slow down well in advance of intersections. Follow other vehicles at a safe distance. Don't tailgate. There's no excuse for a rear-end collision. And perhaps most important, always travel at a speed which is consistent with the road, traffic, and weather. Our tandem axle trucks are equipped with engine brakes, called Jacobs brakes or Jake brakes. These are hydraulic engine attachments that slow down the drive wheels by absorbing the engine's power through air compression. The engine brake is controlled by a dash switch and switches connected to the clutch and accelerator pedals. You manually control the dash switch, but the other switches are activated automatically when you depress or release the clutch and accelerator pedals. Your truck may have a Jake brake instructions decal in the cab, but in any case, you should read the operation instructions. The training requirements manual also explains a lot about their use. Gear selection is very important. A proper balance between engine speed and road speed is needed. As a rule of thumb, choose the gear that you would probably use to climb the grade that you are about to go down. Usually this same gear can be used for controlled descent with the engine brake. The idea is to leave your air brakes in reserve for emergency stops, while the Jake brakes give you complete control of your truck on the downgrade. Now for some review points about turning, backing, and loading. The points covered in Part 2 for single-axle dump trucks apply here as well. Keep your tires at the right pressure. That'll make it easier to control your truck when turning and going around curves. Enter curves at a safe speed. For tight curves, slow down before you enter the curve, downshift if necessary, and speed up slowly as you pass the midpoint of the curve. Signal well in advance of turns. Slow down sufficiently or stop completely as required, and stay in your lane. Now, backing, as I said in Part 2, is the most dangerous of the basic driving maneuvers. Here's a summary of do's and don'ts. Check behind the truck before you back up. Don't assume there's nothing there. Remember those blind spots. Use reference points or a helper to guide you. Use your mirrors. Don't lean out of the cab. And back up at a safe, slow speed. One more point about mirrors. They do distort distance, especially the convex or spot mirrors. Objects may appear farther away than they really are, but your mirrors are still the only way you can check behind you without getting out of the cab. Not only when you're backing up, but also when you're out on the road. Keep an eye on vehicles approaching from the rear. You have to know if anyone is getting into that blind spot before they get there. Okay, a couple of points about loading. Although most of the concerns about loading trucks are covered in the series of programs on front-end loaders, there are a few points that directly relate to the dump truck operator. In Part 2, I talked about positioning your dump truck at a 45-degree angle to the stockpile so that the loader can follow a V pattern between the truck and the stockpile and do a faster job of loading. Well, follow the same procedure whether you're driving a single-axle truck or a tandem-axle truck. Now, here's a point about safety. During loading, if you're not the one up in the loader cab, stay either inside the truck cab or well away from both pieces of equipment. Standing close to the loading is dangerous. And whether you're operating the loader or not, make sure your truck doesn't get overloaded. You are responsible for any overloads. Take the time to clean off excess material spilled on the sides or end of the truck during loading. If you don't, it could fly off and break somebody's windshield. Next, dumping. The procedure is the same as for the single-axle dump truck you saw in Part 2, and the controls also are similar, at least in many of our older tandem-axle dump trucks. There is a power takeoff switch that gets the PTO shaft turning to run the hydraulic pump that supplies the pressure for raising and lowering the dump bed. There's a valve for diverting the hydraulic pressure either to the truck dump bed or to the dump trailer if one is being towed by the truck. There's a hoist control for raising and lowering the dump bed. And there's a tailgate trip lever to release the tailgate and allow the load to dump out. Now, in our newer tandem axle dump trucks, and in some of our older ones too, there are electronic over hydraulic controls. These controls are on a panel next to the operator's seat. Not only do they operate the truck's dump body, but also a pup's dump body when a pup is being towed, as well as a snowplow and a sander when these are attached. Now, spreading. In Part 2, you saw a single-axle dump truck in action spreading sand. Well, that procedure applies just as much to tandem-axle dump trucks spreading a variety of materials. Here on this lane leveling job, it's a matter of spreading hot mix at the right spot and in a uniform layer for the motor grader to do its job. The operator must adjust his tailgate chains, get his truck in position, raise the dump bed, drive forward, Pull the tailgate trip lever at the right time. Raise the bed the rest of the way up to dump all of his load, and lower the bed and relatch the tailgate trip lever. And again, the same steps apply on this job, where an eroded shoulder and slope are being repaired. Get in the proper position, especially here where the ground is uneven and soft. Raise the bed. Drive forward. Trip the tailgate. Raise the bed completely. Lower the bed once the load has been spread. And head back for another load. Now, besides working with motor graders, tandem axle dump trucks work with several other types of equipment. Equipment that is actually hooked up to the trucks. Towing dump trailers, or pups, is covered in the next program of this series on dump trucks. Towing trailers loaded with heavy equipment requires the knowledge of how to hook up and unhook the trailer. Load the trailer. Secure the load, and tow the trailer safely. Pulling an asphalt tailgate paver requires careful backing and hooking up so that neither the equipment nor the hot mix surface are damaged. Then a slow, steady pull by the truck is needed to help produce a smooth, even mat as it empties its load into the paver. Pulling a windrow sizer box involves careful hookup and straight, steady driving to produce a neat, uniform windrow. Pushing a snowplow and carrying a sander require knowledge of how to mount them, calibrate the sander, and adjust both the plow and the sander as necessary out on the road. Working with the chip spreader is different. It actually pulls the truck along behind it. But again, hookup is important. Jarring the chip spreader too hard might damage it or the fresh seal coat. It'll take time before you work with lots of different equipment, and plenty of experience before you're an expert dump truck operator. But as with shifting, once you get the hang of it, you'll be proud of what you've accomplished. So we've reached the end of this program on the tandem axle dump truck. As I said a minute ago, in part 4, you'll see how to work with pups. Here in part 4 of dump truck operation, I'm going to cover working with pups, the dump trailers towed by our tandem axle dump trucks. Pups are used to haul materials such as gravel, salt, and sand. Their use greatly increases the productivity we get from our dump trucks. In this program, we'll look at hooking up the pup, towing, loading, dumping, spreading, and unhooking, starting with hookup. Position your truck in front of the pup and back it up slowly until the hitch on the truck lines up with the trailer tongue. Use a spotter to guide you if possible. Hooking up the pup by yourself can drive you crazy. Raise the jack stand and secure it to the trailer. Then close the hitch and latch it with a pin so it won't pop open. Now you have 5 things to connect to the truck. 2 air lines for the pup's air brakes, the electrical connector to power the pup's lights, the safety chain to prevent the pup from separating from the truck, and finally the hydraulic hose that connects the pup to the truck's hydraulic system for raising and lowering the dump bed. Once you get everything hooked up, there are a couple of things you should check on the pup. First, the tires. Good tires at the right pressure make it easier to control the pup when you're out on the road. Next, the lights. Check for burned out lights and broken lenses. And keep the lights clean. If they're covered with dust, they may as well not be working. Okay, now towing. Of course, in towing pups, you'll need to remember all the points about driving dump trucks I covered in parts 2 and 3. But towing a pup, or any other trailer, requires that you keep a couple of additional things in mind. First, braking. When both the truck and pup are loaded, you've got a lot more weight behind you than when you're driving the truck alone. Now that may seem pretty obvious, but it pays to keep it in mind always. And even though the pup has brakes of its own, you have to allow plenty of stopping room. So anticipate when you'll have to stop. Slow down well in advance of stop signs and red lights. Keep a safe distance between your truck and the vehicle just ahead of you. Never tailgate. For downgrades, slow down and downshift before you start downhill, and use your engine brake if necessary. A second thing to keep in mind is turning. When you're towing a pup, your outfit's not only a lot heavier, but a lot longer too. When you turn or round a curve, the pup takes a shorter path than your truck does. So for curves to the right, keep your left side truck tires close to the left edge of your lane. The pup will take a more inside track, running closer to the pavement edge. And for curves to the left, keep your right side tires running near the pavement edge so that the pup tires won't cross over your lane line. Or on 2-lane roads so that they won't cross over the center line and into the face of oncoming traffic. Be even more cautious when turning corners. Cutting a right turn too sharp will mean running over the curb, into a ditch, or over a sign. And cutting a left turn too sharp will pull the pup over the center line and into contact with any car or truck stopped at the intersection. Stay within your lane at all times. Cutting the turn short like this is not only sloppy, it's also dangerous. So get to know the pup's path and keep an eye on your mirrors on both sides. Finally, backing. Use your mirrors for backing up. And remember this, the pup will back in the direction opposite to the way you turn the steering wheel. So back up only when necessary and do it slowly and carefully. Now for loading. I just want to make a couple of points. First, whether you or someone else loads the truck and pup, Be sure they're loaded properly and not overloaded. Your outfit has to meet load limitations, so know the dump bed capacities and the weight regulations. And once your outfit is loaded, clean off the sides and tailgates of both the truck and the pup to keep spilled material from flying off and becoming a hazard after you're out on the road. So you're on your way. Now let's say you're going to dump your load of salt into a stockpile at a station. Dumping both the dump truck and a pup is a bit tricky. First, get your outfit into position, ready to back up to the stockpile. Then back slowly and carefully. Straight at the stockpile. When the pup reaches the edge of the stockpile, stop. Raise the dump bed and unload the material. Pull ahead a little for the tailgate to clear the pile. Then pull away from the stockpile as you lower the dump bed. Reposition your truck and pup. Now back up again. This time turning the steering wheel enough to get the pup to jackknife. By jackknifing, the pup moves out of the way and allows the truck to get close to the stockpile. Dump the truck's load in the normal way and lower its dump bed. So the hardest part of dumping the pup is probably the maneuvering. It'll take some practice to pull it off smoothly. Now, spreading. As with dumping in a single pile, the first step for tailgate spreading is to position your truck and pup. You'll dump the pup first, so raise the bed part way, drive forward, and as the back of the pup reaches the beginning of the dump area, activate the tailgate trip control and start spreading. The chains, of course, have been adjusted beforehand for the desired tailgate opening. Raise the dump bed all the way up until all the load has been spread. Then lower it. Now to spread your truck's load, back up over the end of the material you just spread from the pup. You'll need this overlap distance to allow you to get up to speed and to start spreading at the end of the previous spread. Raise the dump bed part way drive ahead, and when you see through the mirrors that you've reached the end of the previous spread, pull the tailgate trip lever. As the load is spread, raise the dump bed the rest of the way up. And lower it when the entire load has been placed. Then relatch the tailgate trip lever and head back for another load. Okay, now unhooking the pup. First, be sure the pup's on level ground. Block the wheels if necessary. And be sure to turn off the air switch in the cab before you disconnect the air lines. Pull the safety pin from the hitch, raise the hitch, and unhook the safety chain. Pull the cotter pin to release the jack. Lower the jack and raise the tongue slightly. Then disconnect the air hoses, electrical cable, and hydraulic hose. Drive the truck forward and stow the ends of the hoses and cables safely on the tongue to keep dirt and moisture out and to prevent them from being run over. And that's it for working with pups. In the maintenance division, we use these dump trailers extensively. Your skillful and safe operation will help us get our workloads done. And that's a big part of keeping Utah's highways in good shape.
Some types of heavy equipment are used mainly in one season or another. Weed sprayers work mostly in the spring and fall. Crack sealers function primarily in the cold months. Mowers are busy throughout the growing season. But dump trucks keep going year-round. Every month, week after week, day in and day out. In the first program of this series on dump trucks, you saw the importance of thorough daily checks and servicing to make our trucks safe to operate and keep them in top condition. Well, even with regular daily care, certain other checks and servicing must be done at intervals. This scheduled preventive maintenance that the operator performs is called the PMA. There's also a PMB that either the operator or the district shop performs. So our subject for this final program in the Dump Truck series is Preventive Maintenance A, and I'll briefly go over the PMB requirements as well. I'll also include much of what you already know as the daily check as a review. You see, every time you perform a PMA, you should do the daily check procedure too. And every time you perform a PMB, you also should complete the checks and servicing covered under both the PMA and the daily check. The procedures for the daily check, PMA and PMB, are outlined in the Equipment Preventive Maintenance Manual, and so are the frequencies. So get familiar with this manual and keep track of your truck's hours or miles so you're sure to perform the preventive maintenance on schedule. The manual describes the PMA in terms of what to change, check, lube, service, and inspect. So let's look at the procedure in detail, starting with what to change: the engine oil and the engine oil filter. You start by pulling your unit into the shed over the grease pit. In this program, I'll mainly use a tandem axle truck to demonstrate, but the procedures are similar for single axle dump trucks. You should begin the PMA by removing the oil plug to allow the oil to start draining. Be sure to use a large enough container to hold all the oil, more than 40 quarts for this truck. And remember to take an oil sample to send to the lab for analysis. While the engine oil continues to drain, remove the oil filter. This diesel tandem axle actually has two filters: the primary engine oil filter and a secondary filter called a lubrifiner filter. Your job is to remove both filters and install new ones. So begin by loosening the top of the lubrifiner filter bowl. Be sure to put a pan underneath because some oil is going to spill out. And then open the drain cock at the bottom of the filter bowl to allow the old oil to flow out. This job can be messy, so clean up as you go along. While the oil continues draining from the lubrifiner filter bowl, remove the filter element and discard it. Before you put a new element in the lubrifiner bowl, let all the old oil drain out. So while this is happening, loosen and remove the primary engine oil filter. Again, you'll get some spillage, so be prepared. When the old oil has drained completely from the lubrifiner filter bowl, wipe out the filter bowl. Put in the new element. Put the top back on the bowl and tighten it down. Now, back to the primary engine oil filter. Apply grease to the gasket of the new filter. There are 3 good reasons for this. The grease makes the gasket stick to the filter seat. It provides a better seal, and it allows the gasket to come off easily when it's replaced later on. Wipe off the filter seat. You want the new filter to fit snugly, and you don't want dirt to get into it. Then insert the new filter. Hand tighten it initially, then use a filter wrench to tighten it completely. So with the filters replaced and the engine oil totally drained from the system, add new oil. Of course, be sure to add the correct type and weight for your truck. And once you've added the oil, pull the dipstick and check the level, the same way you normally do. Okay, you've changed the engine oil and engine oil filters. Now it's time to check a number of things: turbocharged engines, drive belts, radiator coolant, transmission, differential, and power steering. On trucks with turbocharged engines, check the hoses and clamps. Are the hoses in good condition? No holes or cracks? Are the clamps in place and tight? Check carefully and thoroughly. Then, check the drive belts. You're interested in proper tension. There should be a little play in them, but not too much. If any are too loose, tighten them. You're also interested in belt condition. Worn, frayed, or cracked belts should be replaced now. Don't wait until they get worse or break. Next, coolant. On this tandem axle truck, there's a coolant overflow tank with a sight glass to read the coolant level. If the level's low, add clean coolant. On some trucks, you may need to check the coolant directly in the radiator. And while you're at it, check the radiator cap. If the gasket's worn, replace it. Now, the transmission. You need to check the fluid level under the truck. So remove the plug and stick your finger in. If you don't feel any fluid, it's time to add some. Next, the differential fluid level. Again, remove the plug. The fluid is flowing here because there's a little air in the system. Back in the engine compartment, check the power steering fluid. And inspect the hoses and clamps of the steering system. Be sure the hoses are in good condition and the connections are tight. Okay, lubrication. Lube the chassis, the door hinges and locks, and the drive shafts and joints. The chassis should be lubricated every 50 hours. That's more frequent than the PMA intervals. You'll need to raise the dump bed to reach many of the fittings. So remember to block the bed to keep it from falling. Use the truck's safety props or a sturdy block of wood. When you lubricate heavy equipment, you want only lubricant in the fittings, no dirt whatsoever. So, wipe each fitting with a clean rag before you attach the grease gun. Apply the right amount of lubricant, just enough to fill the fitting, and clean off any excess lubricant. Exposed lubricant will just attract dirt that could get into the fitting. Lubricate all the fittings indicated by the operator's manual. When the lubricating is completed, service the air cleaner and the battery. For the air cleaner, remove the old filter element and discard it. Clean out the inside of the air cleaner chamber and wipe off the cover. Then insert a new filter element. And put the cover back on. It's a simple procedure, but clean air is vital to a truck's engine. Now, the battery. It's important too, whether it's located inside the engine compartment, behind the cab, or on the side of the truck. There are mainly two things to do: clean the terminals and add water. First, in this case, remove the cover. Brush off the top of the battery and hose it off as well. If there's a buildup of corrosion, spread baking soda on the terminals, brush it in, and add water to get the baking soda solution working. Let the solution work on the corrosion for a couple of minutes. Then brush off the terminals thoroughly. And finish by hosing off the top of the battery until it's clean. To prevent corrosion, you should coat the terminals with grease. But first, dry them off. or else the grease won't stick. Then apply the grease, enough to cover each terminal. Next, take off the cap of each cell and note the water level. It should just cover the rings inside the filler wells. Add water if necessary. On maintenance-free batteries, you don't need to check the level or add water, but you should still check the terminals and clean the top of the battery. Now, inspect several things: the air intake system, the exhaust system, and the tires. Look closely for leaks in the air intake system, holes, loose clamps, and so on. Tighten any loose clamps or fix any other problems if you can. But if it's a problem you can't take care of, report it to your supervisor. Also, inspect the exhaust system for leaks. And then the tires. Inspect them for proper inflation. Pounding them with a hammer, when you know how to interpret the thuds that you hear, is good for an approximate check. Underinflated tires will have a duller sound. But for a more accurate check, use a pressure gauge. Add air or bleed it off as necessary. Inspect the lug nuts. They should all be tight. And note the condition of the tires. Look for cuts, breaks, and wear in the treads and sidewalls. Now, as I pointed out earlier, you should cover everything that you normally would include in your daily check when you perform a PMA. Walk around the truck and look closely at things you haven't checked already. Look for leaks, loose parts, damage. This cut in the hose might lead to a failure in the dump bed hydraulics if left this way. So fix it now. Are all lights working? Again, now's the time for repairs. Wash the windshield and mirrors. Keep the headlights clean too. And fill up the windshield washer reservoir before you head out. So that covers the PMA. But I also said early in the program that I'd go over the PMB procedure briefly. The PMB may be performed by the operator or the district shop, and it should be done at least annually. To do the PMB, you should rotate tires and match the tires on duals. You should check the dash instruments and gauges to see that they all work properly and give accurate readings. Also, check all lights and reflectors. Be sure they're in place and functioning. Check the air brake system for leaks. Pack the front wheel bearings with lubricant. And check the oil pack for the other wheels too. Service the fuel filter, the engine air cleaner, and the transmission air filter. Finally, sample the transmission oil and the differential oil. Put the samples in the proper containers, label them, and send them to the lab. And that brings us to the end of this program on dump truck PMA, last in the series of videotapes on dump truck operation and maintenance. There's no getting around the fact that we depend on our trucks here in the maintenance division in all seasons and in most of our activities. Operating and maintaining your truck properly makes a real contribution toward the Department of Transportation's overall performance. And that performance means a better road system for Utah.